So if we rewind to November of 2004, the United States Navy is tracking this, well, this object off the coast of California.
Right, the Nimitz encounter.
Exactly. And this thing has no wings. It has no exhaust plume. There were no flight control surfaces at all.
Nothing that makes a normal aircraft fly, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And according to both the radar operators and the fighter pilots who intercepted it, this object just drops from 80,000 feet all the way down to sea level in seconds.
Which is physically impossible for our tech.
Right. It didn't burn up in the atmosphere. There was absolutely no sonic boom.
Unbelievable.
And when the pilots actually engaged with it, it mirrored their movements perfectly, before just accelerating away at speeds that, they just completely break our current understanding of physics.
They really do.
So today, we aren't just going to tell you what that object was. We're actually going to look at these newly declassified documents that suggest the global intelligence community has known exactly what it was since, at least 1933.
Yeah, and it is the ultimate paradigm shift.
Oh, totally.
If you think about the technological leap from, say, a horse-drawn carriage to a smartphone.
A huge leap.
Right. But now imagine a leap 1,000 times more profound than that. One that literally rewrites our entire place in the cosmos. Because that is what we are looking at today with these sources.
Seriously. If you are listening to this deep dive right now, you are sitting right on the razor's edge of the biggest before and after line in human history.
We are officially entering the after era.
We really are. So our deep dive today is centered on this completely staggering, heavily detailed presentation from June 2026. It's called Disclosure 101.
Right. Delivered by Jim Kilgard at the Hutchings Museum.
Yeah, and introduced by the biologist Ben Woodruff.
Yeah.
And our mission today, because this topic is just so massive and spans decades, is to break it down so clearly that, a high school student could easily follow it.
Which is so needed, honestly. There's so much noise out there.
Too much noise. So we want to construct a really clear timeline, from ancient history all the way to the 2026 congressional and presidential actions.
And crucially, we have to decode the science.
Yes, the physics.
Because you hear all this stuff about sightings and hearings, but without understanding the actual physics of what people are seeing or how this was systematically kept secret.
It just sounds like a crazy news cycle.
Exactly. It just washes over you.
So if you're listening and thinking, this is just a distraction from real geopolitical news, stick with us. Because the geopolitical implications of this are literally the whole ball game.
They absolutely are.
But before we jump into the timeline, we have to talk about the vocabulary. Because even the language we use for this has been totally restructured by the government lately. We don't really even say UFO anymore, do we?
We don't, no. Not in any official military or scientific capacity.
It's all UAP now.
Right. Unidentified anomalous phenomena. The term UFO has been completely retired.
Which, let's be honest, sounds a lot like a massive corporate rebranding campaign.
Yeah.
Like, why the shift? Is it just to shake off the tinfoil hat baggage?
Well, the cultural baggage is definitely a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The intelligence community realized that if a pilot saw something, the term UFO has so much stigma attached to it.
No green men and all that.
Exactly. Pilots literally wouldn't report it because it would ruin their careers. But it's also primarily about scientific accuracy.
Okay, how so?
Think about the word flying. Flying implies you are moving aerodynamically through the air, right? Using lift, drag, thrust.
Like an airplane.
But, as we'll see when we talk about the physics, these phenomena don't actually fly. They don't interact with the air the way our jets do at all.
Right.
Furthermore, object implies this nuts and bolts metallic craft, and sometimes that is what people see. But other times, sensors are tracking these bizarre energy manifestations or things transitioning straight from space into the deep ocean.
So unidentified anomalous phenomena just covers the reality much better.
Exactly. It's a much more accurate umbrella term.
That makes total sense. But there's another terminology shift in the source material that really made me stop and think. They aren't using the words aliens or extraterrestrials in these official documents either.
No, they aren't.
The new standard term is NHI, non-human intelligence.
Yes. And that distinction is incredibly crucial. Because shifting from extraterrestrial to non-human intelligence is, well, it's basically a profound admission of ignorance by our government.
Because extraterrestrial assumes we know their zip code. Right?
Yeah.
It literally means from another planet.
Precisely. It assumes they come from a localized origin in another solar system. By using non-human intelligence, scientists and military whistleblowers are leaving the door wide open.
Like they could be from anywhere.
Right. They might be from Alpha Centauri, But they might also be from another dimension. Or they might be a cryptoterrestrial species native to Earth, just living down in our oceans.
We just don't know.
We simply don't have the definitive data to say extraterrestrial. So NHI is just the most intellectually honest term we have right now.
Okay, so with the vocabulary established, let's actually look at the timeline. Because to understand the 2026 declassifications, we have to realize this is not a new phenomenon.
Not at all.
The source material makes a strong argument that if you think the modern UAP era started in 1947 with, like, a weather balloon in Roswell, you are off by thousands of years.
Yeah, the presentation highlights a really robust historical aggregate of sightings, like ancient Hindu scriptures describing Vimanas.
Those are the flying craft, right?
Right, these exotic, highly advanced flying craft piloted by beings that the ancient people interpreted as gods. And you also have biblical accounts, like Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel coming down from the sky.
See, I have to push back a little on that, though. Couldn't Ezekiel's wheel or even the Vimanas just be, I don't know, hallucinations? Or ancient people using mythological language to describe a meteor shower?
Sure. If we were looking at a single isolated text, absolutely. Historians do that all the time. But it's the aggregate data that makes it so compelling.
You mean the pattern?
And yes, the corroboration across entirely disconnected global cultures. For instance, the presentation talks about McConkey Ranch in Utah.
Oh, the petroglyphs.
Yeah.
Yeah, the source goes into detail about these Native American carvings that are estimated to be between 800 and 2,000 years old.
Right.
And they depict these figures wearing what clearly look like helmets, visors, and antennas coming out of their heads.
It's pretty undeniable when you look at them.
You literally have ancient people carving a permanent record into solid stone of entities that match modern descriptions of astronauts or NHI.
Exactly. But if we want to move past historical interpretation and look at documented, modern government retrieval.
The actual physical stuff.
Right. The presentation pinpoints a very specific, much more recent date, and it wasn't Roswell in 1947.
No.
It was June 1933 outside Milan, Italy, near a town called Magenta.
Okay, I have to say, this part of the source material was genuinely hard for me to wrap my head around. A flying saucer crashing in fascist Italy, recovered by Benito Mussolini, and kept secret with the help of the Vatican. I mean, come on, that sounds exactly like the plot of a Dan Brown thriller. What is the actual evidence for this?
I know it sounds like fiction, but
Yeah.
you have to look at who is putting this on the public record. In July 2023, David Grudge,
He's the whistleblower, right?
yes, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer who co-led the UAP portfolio for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, he testified about this exact Italian crash under oath before the United States Congress.
Under penalty of perjury. That's a big deal.
A massive deal. Grudge testified that Mussolini's regime recovered a saucer-shaped craft about 10 meters wide, and it contained non-human occupants.
Wow.
Mussolini ordered absolute silence on the whole thing, and according to the intelligence files Grudge saw, the craft was eventually passed along to the Nazis for reverse engineering during World War II.
That is terrifying to think about.
It is. But then, at the end of the war, around late 1944 or 1945, the United States basically swooped in and obtained this craft.
And the Vatican helped.
According to historical intelligence, yes, the Vatican back-channeled the location to the Allied forces. And Grudge stated on the Congressional record that the U.S. still has this craft today.
That is just staggering. And according to the timeline in the presentation, Magenta wasn't just a one-off thing. By the time the U.S. entered World War II, things were escalating super fast.
Very fast.
Like in April 1941 in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, the source talks about a local reverend, William Huffman, who was called out to a farmer's field by the authorities to administer last rites.
Right, a very somber duty.
But he gets there and finds a crashed saucer, and these 3 to 4 foot tall beings with huge heads, big black eyes, spindly arms.
Classic gray alien description.
Exactly. And the military just cordons off the area and swears everyone, including the Reverend, to absolute secrecy.
And then just a few months later, you have the Battle of Los Angeles in February 1942. The U.S. had just gotten into the war after Pearl Harbor, so tensions were incredibly high.
Everyone was on edge.
Right. And these strange, impervious craft appeared in the sky right over L.A. The military assumed it was a Japanese air raid.
Natural.
So they fired millions of rounds of anti-aircraft artillery at these things for hours. Millions of rounds.
And nothing happened.
Nothing. The craft just absorbed the fire and slowly drifted away.
Insane. And then we hit the Trinity atomic bomb test in New Mexico in 1945, where UAPs were actually recorded observing our nuclear detonation.
Which becomes a major theme later on.
Right. And then, jumping to June 24, 1947, a civilian pilot named Kenneth Arnold reports seeing a group of craft flying like a saucer skipping across water.
Which is literally where the media got the phrase flying saucer.
Exactly. And all of this, Magenta, Missouri, L.A., Trinity, Kenneth Arnold, all of it happens before the famous Roswell crash in July 1947.
Which is such vital context for the listener, because by the time the Roswell incident hit the newspapers, the intelligence community already had 14 years of solid data.
Starting from 1933.
Yes. They already knew they were dealing with highly advanced, unexplainable, non-human hardware.
Okay. But this leads to just the most obvious, glaring question. If you have sightings involving the military firing millions of rounds over Los Angeles, if you have reverends giving last rites to non-human entities, how on earth did the government keep the public in the dark for almost a century?
It seems impossible, right?
It really does. A cover-up of that magnitude should spring a leak eventually.
Well, it did spring leaks. Constantly. But the government didn't just hide the physical debris. They built a massive psychological fortress around the entire topic.
The architecture of the secrecy.
Exactly. So in 1947, the U.S. formed the modern Air Force and officially established the CIA. And just 2 months after Roswell, in September 1947, General Nathan Twining, who was one of the highest-ranking generals in the Army Air Force, wrote a highly classified document.
The Twining Memo.
Yes. It's now totally declassified, sitting in the National Archives.
And what did it actually say?
It explicitly tells the highest levels of government that the UAP phenomenon is, quote, real and not visionary or fictitious.
Wow. So they knew.
They absolutely knew it was real physical hardware in 1947.
So if they knew it was real, why the massive cover-up? Why not just tell the public, hey guys, we have visitors?
You have to remember the geopolitical context of the Cold War.
Oh, right. The Soviets.
Exactly. The source details the Robertson Panel of 1953, which the CIA commissioned. The intelligence community was totally terrified. Not necessarily that aliens were going to invade, but that the public would panic.
Ontological shocks.
Right. They worried that people's minds would just break, threatening the orderly functioning of society. And practically speaking, they were terrified the Soviet Union could use UFO sightings for psychological warfare.
Like clogging up military communication channels.
Yes. Flooding the switchboards with false reports of flying saucers so a real Soviet nuclear bomber strike could slip right through unnoticed.
Okay. So their solution to the threat of Soviet psychological warfare was to launch their own psychological warfare campaign against the American public.
Exactly. The Robertson panel recommended a sweeping multi-agency policy to completely debunk UFOs and culturally stigmatize the whole topic.
They basically weaponized pop culture.
It really did.
The source points out how the government influenced media in the 1950s, like all those B-movie sci-fi films, The Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds.
Yeah, leaning into the little green men trope.
Even cartoons, like the Flintstones introducing the Great Gazoo. It was just this brilliant, kind of sinister strategy. Make the idea of non-human intelligence so cartoonish and silly that if a credible commercial pilot or a cop actually saw a craft hovering over a highway,
They wouldn't dare report it.
right, because their career would be over. Everyone would treat them like a complete joke.
The stigma was entirely engineered from the top down. And you can actually track the mechanism of this cover-up through the official government projects.
The alphabet soup.
Exactly. They created these public-facing projects just to placate the media. Project Sign in 1948 actually concluded the craft were extraterrestrial.
Wait, really? The official project said that?
Yes. But the Pentagon leadership completely rejected that conclusion, so they shut Sign down and launched Project Grudge in 1949. And Grudge's explicit, documented mandate was to alleviate public anxiety by persuading people that UFOs were nothing unusual.
Just debunk everything.
Right. And then came Project Blue Book, which ran from 1952 to 1969.
Blue Book is the famous one. That's the one everyone points to as the government taking this seriously.
But the source outlines how it was essentially a sham operation. In the late 60s, the government funded the Condon Report at the University of Colorado to basically put the final nail in the coffin.
just to shut down Blue Book for good.
Exactly. The Condon report concluded there was no scientific merit to investigating UFOs, but the bias was baked in from day one. The presentation actually quotes Edward Condon, the physicist running the study, stating in an interview, quote, "UFOs are not real. Of course, I'm not supposed to arrive at that conclusion for another year."
Wow. He just admitted his scientific inquiry was totally predetermined.
Totally. But the absolute smoking gun of this whole bureaucratic cover-up is the Bolender memo from 1969.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
Right. It was written by Brigadier General Carol Bolender. He was officially recommending terminating Project Blue Book. But the shocking part of that memo, which, again, is fully declassified in the National Archives, is his admission that UAP reports that actually affected national security were never even sent to the Blue Book system to begin with.
Because it was a two-track system.
Exactly.
The real cases, the insane military encounters, were secretly withheld in classified channels, while the Blue Book investigators were just handed reports of, like, weather balloons in Venus to publicly debunk for the press.
They gaslit the global public for decades. They created a culture where seeing something anomalous meant you were unstable, all while secretly funneling billions into black budget programs to study the exact phenomena they were publicly denying.
It's infuriating. But here is the crux of the whole issue. Despite all that money and the psychological warfare and the systematic denial, the phenomena simply wouldn't stay hidden.
You cannot legislate a phenomenon out of existence when it just keeps showing up in the sky.
Right, which brings us to the decades of defiance. Let's look at the sightings that broke right through that wall of noise, because the aggregate data here is staggering.
It really is.
Let's start with McMinnville, Oregon in 1950. You have a rabbit farmer and his wife who take photos of a classic metallic flying saucer. And these are not blurry smudges. They are crystal clear images on film negatives.
And despite decades of attempts by professional skeptics, modern optical scientists still cannot definitively debunk them.
Then you have the Washington, D.C. flap of July 1952. Unidentified craft flew directly over the White House and the Capitol building.
It tracked on multiple radar stations simultaneously.
Right. And the military scrambled interceptor jets, but these craft easily outran and outmaneuvered them, just playing a cat-and-mouse game over the most restricted airspace on the entire planet.
And it wasn't just restricted airspace, it was our most sensitive strategic assets. Let's talk about Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, March 1967.
Yeah, this one is so chilling.
It's one of the most sobering incidents on record. A glowing, disc-shaped UAP hovered directly over a nuclear missile silo facility. And as it hovered there, 10 fully operational live Minuteman nuclear missiles just simultaneously deactivated.
Which is terrifying.
The guidance and control systems simply failed. They went offline.
Who does that even happen? Like, was it an EMP? An electromagnetic pulse?
That's the huge mystery. An EMP would fry the circuits completely. They'd be destroyed. But these missiles weren't fried. They were just taken offline, placed into a no-go state.
So it's intentional.
It demonstrated surgical technological superiority over our most advanced deterrents, and the government hid that event for decades until the actual launch officers who were in the bunker finally came forward to testify.
And it wasn't an isolated incident. It happened again at Vandenberg Air Force Base in 2003, where contractors reported a red, square-shaped craft the size of a football field hovering over the launch facilities before just vanishing in the blink of an eye. But, I think what's even more compelling than the military encounters are the mass civilian sightings globally.
Absolutely.
Like the aerial school incident in Rua, Zimbabwe in September 1994.
Yes, where nearly 100 school children and their teachers witnessed a craft land on the school grounds in broad daylight.
Broad daylight.
Non-human beings actually exited the craft. The children reported receiving telepathic communications about environmental degradation. And decades later, those kids are adults scattered all across the globe, and their testimonies have never wavered. Not once.
Then there's Varginha, Brazil, in January 1996. The presentation calls this one of the most compelling NHI incidents ever recorded.
It's an incredible case.
A cylinder-shaped craft crashed near the town, and at least 3 non-human occupants actually survived the crash. They were seen by multiple civilians, including these 3 young sisters, who described a being with brown skin, red eyes, 3 distinct ridges on its head, and this powerful, terrible smell of ammonia.
Yeah, the biological details are wild.
The military locked down the entire city. And a local military police officer actually captured one of the entities with his bare hands.
Marco Cherez.
Right. And he died days later from a mysterious infection that his immune system just completely failed to fight off.
And importantly, the source notes that recently, the Minister of Defense for Brazil actually confirmed that this incident happened.
Wait, I have to stop you. A sitting defense minister confirming the recovery of a crashed non-human craft and its occupants. That is huge.
It is. The level of disclosure happening outside the United States is accelerating rapidly. Countries like Brazil and France have been much more transparent about their military encounters than the U.S. has historically been.
That is wild. And speaking of mass sightings, we absolutely haven't mentioned the Phoenix Lights of March 1997.
Oh, of course.
A massive V-shaped craft. Some described it as being larger than an aircraft carrier. Just drifted silently right over the state of Arizona.
It literally blocked out the stars as it passed over.
Yeah. It was witnessed by thousands of people. And the military eventually tried to claim they were just dropping A-10 Warthog flares.
The standard excuse.
Right. And the governor of Arizona at the time, Vice Symington, held this press conference where he literally mocked his own constituents by having his chief of staff walk out in a giant plastic alien costume.
It was so disrespectful, but the source notes the fascinating addendum to that story. Years later, after Symington went to prison for unrelated corruption charges and got out, he gave an interview where he completely recanted his behavior.
He apologized.
He admitted he was pressured by the military to orchestrate that press conference to avoid mass panic.
And the kicker is, he confessed that he himself had seen the craft.
Oh, exactly.
He was a pilot, and he said it was the biggest thing he had ever seen in his life, and it was categorically not flares.
It's amazing.
If you think about it, imagine being a resident of Phoenix, or the kids of the aerial school, or that rabbit farmer in Oregon. You know exactly what you saw. It's burned into your memory forever. Yet the entire global authority structure gaslights you and tells you you're crazy for decades.
It is the textbook definition of institutional gaslighting. But eventually, the dam had to break.
It always does.
And it broke primarily because the military's own sensory technology, their advanced radar, their infrared targeting pods, got so good that they could no longer deny what they were tracking.
Right, because human eyes can be fooled.
Exactly. But a multi-million-dollar Aegis radar system synchronized with FLIR targeting cameras, that cannot be fooled.
Which brings us right back to the modern military encounters. The 2004 Tic Tac incident with the Nimitz that we opened the show with. The 2006 O'Hare Airport sighting, where a saucer hovered over the United terminal and then shot straight up, leaving this perfectly round hole punched right through the cloud layer.
And the 2015 gimbal and go fast videos captured by Navy pilots on the East Coast.
So let's put aside the classified jargon for a second. Physically, what do these craft actually do that our jets can't? How do scientists separate a balloon or a drone from something truly anomalous?
To do that, the source walks us through what are known as the 6 observables.
Okay, let's get into this.
These were established by the UAP task force under the Department of Defense. They are the physical performance characteristics that categorize a true UAP. And they're crucial to understand because they don't just represent a slight technological leap over our jets, they completely break our current understanding of physics.
Okay, break them down for us. Observable number 1.
Observable number 1 is positive lift, or anti-gravity. These objects hover and maneuver without any aerodynamic flight surfaces. There are no wings, no flaps, no rotors, and absolutely no exhaust plumes. They defy Earth's gravity with no visible propulsion system.
Wait, so if they don't have exhaust pushing out the back, how are they staying up?
Well, physicists theorize it involves space-time metric engineering. Instead of pushing mass out the back to go forward, which is how every human rocket works, they might be manipulating gravity itself, creating a localized gravitational field around the craft.
Wow, which perfectly sets up observable number 2, instantaneous acceleration. We are talking about the ability to change speed and direction immediately.
Right.
Stopping on a dime from incredibly high speeds or making instantaneous right-angle turns. The source notes these craft have been tracked accelerating to speeds up to 40,000 miles per hour.
Which is insane.
That is 10 times faster than the SR-71 Blackbird, which is the fastest admitted jet in human history.
And this is where the physics completely breaks down based on classical mechanics.
Right, because think about it. If you are in a car doing 60 miles an hour and you hit a brick wall, the inertia throws you right through the windshield.
Exactly.
If a physical object is moving at 40,000 miles per hour and makes a sudden 90-degree turn without slowing down, the G-forces involved should turn whatever biological entity is inside that craft into absolute soup.
Pure liquid.
The metallic structure of the craft itself should tear apart like wet tissue paper. How do they survive that?
This is where the concept of the localized field comes in again. Imagine a surfer inside a perfectly still wave pool.
Okay.
If the entire wave pool is somehow transported at 100 miles per hour, the surfer is moving 100 miles per hour relative to the outside world. But relative to the water immediately around them, they are perfectly still. They feel no wind, no acceleration.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. Physicists hypothesize these craft create a localized quantum vacuum or a warp bubble. They aren't actually moving through space, they are bending space around them. So inside the craft, they experience zero g-forces.
That is mind-bending.
Yeah.
But it explains the third observable perfectly. Hypersonic velocities without signatures.
Exactly.
Because if they're moving 40,000 miles per hour through our atmosphere, they should be burning up from friction, leaving a massive heat signature and creating earth-shattering sonic booms. But they don't.
Right, because if they are encased in a warp bubble, the craft itself is never actually touching the atmospheric molecules. The air just slips seamlessly around the bubble. No friction means no heat signature, and no displacement of air means no sonic boom.
It's almost elegant. Observable number 4 is low observability, or cloaking. Radar systems have an incredibly difficult time locking onto them, and sometimes they seamlessly disappear from the naked eye. They just blink out of existence or blend into the environment.
Which makes tracking them a nightmare. Now, observable number 5 is perhaps the most shocking to naval commanders. Transmedium travel.
This one is crazy.
It is. It's the ability to move seamlessly between different physical mediums, from the vacuum of space down through the Earth's atmosphere and plunging deep underwater.
And according to the naval reports, they hit the ocean going thousands of miles an hour without producing a splash, and they maintain their velocity underwater.
Which shouldn't be possible.
Water is 1,000 times denser than air. A bullet fired into water stops after just a few feet. How does a craft maintain hypersonic speeds underwater?
Again, it all comes back to the bubble. If the space-time metric is warped around the craft, the water naturally flows around the boundary of the bubble without ever exerting hydrodynamic drag on the hull itself.
It really is a unified theory for how these things work. And finally, the sixth observable, which moves away from the flight characteristics entirely, biological effects. The source mentions that close proximity to these craft takes a severe, measurable physical toll on human beings.
Yes, the medical literature on this is growing rapidly. We are talking about radiation burns, scarring, temporary loss of vision or hearing.
And the psychological phenomenon of lost time or memory gaps, right?
And long-term effects too, like severe autoimmune diseases, blood disorders, and neurological damage that heavily mirror the symptoms of Havana syndrome.
So we really aren't just looking at lights in the sky. We are looking at physical hardware emitting intense, dangerous microwave or ionizing radiation. So we have a timeline spanning from ancient petroglyphs to 21st century fighter jets. We have a documented history of a 70-year government psychological operation, and we have a scientific framework, the 6 observables. The obvious next question is, if the cover-up was so incredibly robust, how did this wall of secrecy finally start to crumble? What was the tipping point that got us to where we are in 2026?
According to the presentation, the definitive tipping point was December 16th, 2017.
Ah, the New York Times article.
Yes, they published a bombshell front-page article titled Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program. This article, penned by investigative journalists including Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean, forced the Pentagon to publicly admit that, despite decades of denial and the conclusions of the Condon Report, they actually had secret, taxpayer-funded programs studying UFOs the whole time.
And that article revealed the modern alphabet soup of covert programs. There was AAWSOP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program, which ran from 2008 to 2010.
Right.
Then ATEEP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, famously managed by Luis Elizondo. And that eventually gave way to the UAP Task Force and the current public-facing office, AAIR, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office.
That New York Times article broke the stigma. It gave Congress the permission structure they needed to actually start asking questions without fear of being publicly ridiculed.
It made it safe for politicians to care.
Exactly. And that public revelation sparked a legislative wildfire that fundamentally changed the landscape.
Which brings us to the modern push for transparency in Congress. And as we discuss this, we want to be incredibly clear. We are maintaining strict political impartiality here.
Yes, absolutely.
We are simply reporting the facts of legislation exactly as they are presented in the source material. Because this issue really transcends standard partisan politics. The presentation highlights a massive piece of proposed legislation called the UAP Disclosure Act, or UAPDA.
And just to prove how nonpartisan this is, it was co-authored by Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Mike Rounds. Two politicians who agree on almost nothing else joined forces on this exact issue.
Which tells you something big is going on behind the scenes.
Exactly. The language and provisions within the UAP Disclosure Act were totally unprecedented in American legislative history. The most aggressive element was an eminent domain clause.
No, wait, why would a UAP bill need an eminent domain clause? Isn't that usually for, like, the government seizing land to build highways?
Usually, yes. But the source explains that according to whistleblowers, the most highly classified materials, the actual retrieved, crashed, non-human craft and biological evidence, are not actually held by the U.S. military or the Department of Defense directly.
Oh.
Decades ago, they were quietly passed off to private aerospace defense contractors.
Oh, I see. Because private companies aren't subject to the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, and they don't have to answer to congressional oversight committees the way the military does. It's a massive legal loophole to hide the hardware.
It's brilliant, really, but terrible for transparency. The eminent domain clause would have granted the federal government the legal authority to seize those craft back from the defense contractors, basically asserting that non-human technology belongs to the American people, not private corporations.
That is a bold move. The bill also mandated a 25-year automatic declassification rule for all UAP files. But here is the part that is truly historic. The source notes that within the text of this actual congressional bill, the phrase non-human intelligence was used over 20 times.
That is the United States Senate officially drafting laws to deal with non-human intelligence.
Unbelievable.
However, the source points out that the strongest enforcement mechanisms of the bill, specifically that eminent domain clause to seize the craft, were ultimately blocked in the House of Representatives.
By politicians whose constituents are heavily employed by those exact same aerospace defense contractors.
Yeah. Right, so the corporate secrecy apparatus fought back and won that round.
But the push for transparency didn't end with Congress. The presentation details a monumental executive action taken just weeks before the June 2026 presentation. On May 8, 2026, President Trump issued the Pursue Directive.
Yes. Pursue stands for the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. This directive essentially bypassed the legislative gridlock and ordered the immediate, unredacted declassification and release of historical files pertaining to UAP and non-human intelligence.
And the very first drop from the Pursue Directive yielded 161 previously classified documents, photos, and videos.
And the bombshells in those documents are staggering.
Seriously. First, they proved that NASA had been actively participating in the cover-up for over 50 years.
Yeah, that was huge.
The documents confirmed that the Apollo astronauts, including Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin during Apollo 11 and the crew of Apollo 17, absolutely saw UAPs while on their lunar missions. The source mentions that actual photos taken by the astronauts of these anomalous craft on the surface of the moon were included in that Pursue release.
It rewrites the history of the moon landing entirely. The drop also included a remarkable intelligence file dating back to 1948.
Oh, the Swedish memo.
Yes. It detailed multiple ghost rocket and UFO incidents over Sweden. The United States consulted Swedish intelligence, and the Swedish officials formally concluded in the memo that these craft are the result of a, quote, high technical skill which cannot be credited to any presently known culture on Earth.
So you have allied intelligence agencies formally assessing that this is non-human technology almost 80 years ago.
It's incredible validation.
Okay, so just to recap, Congress is trying to pass laws seizing non-human craft. Presidents are declassifying photos of UAPs on the moon. We have craft pulling 40,000 miles an hour right-angle turns and shutting down nuclear silos. We are left with the ultimate, terrifying, but kind of exhilarating question. What are they and where do they come from?
And this is where we have to transition from empirical data into theoretical frameworks. The source outlines 8 main hypotheses regarding their origin.
And these aren't just internet conspiracies, right?
Not at all. These are the actual theories currently being debated by quantum physicists, intelligence officials, and biologists inside these programs. Let's walk through them.
Sure.
Hypothesis number 1 is the U.S. Black Projects theory. The idea that this is our own top-secret compartmentalized military tech.
Okay, let's test that against the timeline.
Okay.
Does a crashed saucer in Italy in 1933 fit a U.S. Black Project? Did we have anti-gravity warp bubbles during the Great Depression?
No. The historical data invalidates it completely. The U.S. might have reverse engineered some of it by now, but they certainly didn't invent it.
Which also invalidates hypothesis number 2. A foreign adversary, like China or Russia leapfrogging us technologically.
Right. Even if China has incredible drone swarms today, they weren't deactivating our nukes with floating disks in 1967.
Exactly. Hypothesis number 3 is a rogue billionaire. A brilliant mind like an Elon Musk developing breakthrough physics in absolute secrecy. But again, billionaires weren't flying Tic Tacs over the Pacific in 1952.
Exactly. So we have to look outside modern human civilization. Hypothesis number 4 is the classic extraterrestrial hypothesis. They are off-world visitors from another star system or galaxy, traveling across the vastness of deep space in physical craft.
This is the one pop culture is most comfortable with.
Right. But according to the source, the investigators are actually starting to lean into theories that are deeply strange.
And that brings us to hypothesis 5, the crypto-terrestrial or culture-terrestrial theory.
This is a fascinating one.
It really is. It posits that these beings did not travel millions of light years to get here. Instead, they are native to Earth. They are an advanced species that evolved alongside us, or maybe even before us, and have remained hidden, perhaps living deep in the oceans or in subterranean cave systems.
I want to spend some time on this one because the presentation spends a massive amount of time discussing Skinwalker Ranch in Utah.
The paranormal Candyland.
Exactly. It was the primary focus of the government's secret AAW SOP program. During the Q&A portion of the source presentation, the staff archaeologist for Skinwalker Ranch, Chris Roberts, was asked about recent findings deep inside the mesa on the property.
And his answer provides physical data that heavily supports this crypto-terrestrial theory. Roberts confirms that archaeologically the ranch shows layered occupations from almost every ancient human culture in the region. Paleo, Archaic, Fremont, Ute, dating back thousands of years.
It's highly unusual to find all those distinct cultural layers perfectly stacked in one place. It suggests humans have always been drawn to the specific geographic hotspot for millennia.
But the real bombshell is the material they found buried deep within the mesa itself. Roberts describes extracting a highly advanced, unexplainable, ceramic-like material.
Right.
It is completely unnatural to the sandstone mesa. It fluoresces brilliantly under blacklight, indicating it has synthetic engineered properties. But here is the kicker. It shows heavy post-depositional accretions and erosion.
Which is the critical detail here. Roberts explains that the level of erosion proves this engineered material has been buried in the ground for a very, very long time, long before modern human beings possessed the chemical technology to create advanced fluorescing polymers or ceramics.
So you have a highly technological material that is also ancient. It defies conventional history. As Roberts jokes in the presentation, it almost made their lead scientist admit to the ancient aliens theory.
The presenter, Jim Kilgard, notes that if you have ancient, high-tech ceramics buried in a mesa, maybe they are an advanced species native to Earth who have been utilizing this location for thousands of years.
It's totally plausible based on the evidence. But the theories get even weirder. Hypothesis number 6 is the interdimensional hypothesis.
This one is heavily supported by theoretical physicists. The idea is that these entities are coming from a reality operating parallel to our three-dimensional space.
Like string theory.
Exactly. String theory allows for up to 11 dimensions. These entities might be folding time and space to briefly manifest in our reality, which perfectly explains why the craft seem to just blink in and out of existence or change shape. They are intersecting our 3D space from a higher dimension.
Like a 3D sphere passing through a 2D piece of paper.
Yes. To the 2D people, it just looks like a circle that grows and shrinks and vanishes.
Okay, hypothesis number 7 is the angels and demons hypothesis. This is driven heavily by theological and religious frameworks. The idea that these are spiritual entities manifesting physically.
And the source actually shares a wild piece of current events from 2026 regarding this. The chief exorcist of the Roman Catholic Church for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., went on mainstream news and declared that UAPs were demonic and satanic in nature.
And the institutional response to that was immediate.
Oh, very soft.
The Archbishop fired him on the spot. And the Catholic Church then released a formal statement clarifying that the Pope and the Vatican do not view these phenomena as demonic or satanic.
They are essentially attempting to prepare their followers for the reality of NHI without framing it as spiritual warfare.
Which is probably a smart move.
Yeah.
And finally, hypothesis 8 is simulation theory, driven by philosophers like Nick Bostrom. The idea that our entire reality is just a highly advanced digital construct, a matrix.
And under this theory, these UAPs are essentially glitches, cursors, or maintenance programs operating within the simulation's code, which is why they are unbounded by the programmed physics of the simulation.
That's why they can break the rules, because they are the code.
Exactly. When you look at all 8 hypotheses, it becomes so clear why the government was terrified of disclosure in the 1950s. Whether it's multidimensional beings, ancient cryptoterrestrials, or an extraterrestrial presence, it completely upends humanity's understanding of its place in the pecking order of the universe.
We aren't at the top of the food chain anymore. Which brings us to the summary of this incredible journey. We set out today to take this sprawling topic and explain it systematically.
And we covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We've traveled from 2,000-year-old Native American petroglyphs in Utah to a 1933 crashed saucer held by Mussolini. We've unmasked a 70-year government psychological operation specifically designed to make normal people feel crazy for believing their own eyes.
We've broken down the 6 observables and the warp bubble physics that just shatter our current scientific models.
And we've arrived at a moment in 2026 where the President and Congress are openly releasing documents proving the existence of non-human intelligence.
So, as a listener, what are you actually supposed to do with this information? The source leaves the audience with a very clear, powerful call to action. You must avoid confirmation bias at all costs.
Yes, that is so important.
Don't be a closed-minded, cynical skeptic who refuses to look at the hard data, who would deny the existence of a non-human craft even if it landed on the White House lawn. But equally, don't blindly accept every wild story or grainy video on the internet without demanding rigorous evidence. You have to demand the data.
And most importantly, you have to talk about it. The presenter urges people to talk to their friends, their family, their coworkers about UAPs and NHI.
The only way to finally permanently break the multi-generational stigma that the CIA and the Air Force engineered in the 1950s is to bring the topic into the light of everyday, serious conversation.
It requires a collective courage to look at the evidence objectively, without fear of ridicule.
Absolutely.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that builds right on the edge of the source material. The presenter pointed out that 500 years ago, everyone knew the Earth was flat and was the center of the universe. If you challenge that, you were a heretic.
Right.
Today, everyone knows we are the apex predator, the only intelligent life on Earth. But think about the transmedium travel we discussed. Craft moving flawlessly at 40,000 miles an hour from space, down through our atmosphere and plunging deep into our oceans without a splash, operating with total impunity. The oceans. What if for the last 70 years we've been staring up at the stars with our telescopes, desperate to find visitors from another world, while the greatest non-human intelligence in the universe was sitting at the bottom of our own oceans, looking right back up at us?
That is a chilling thought.
Something to think about. See you next time on The Deep Dive.